This is going to be awesome, everyone. Let's welcome in longtime former Winnipeg Jet captain Blake Wheeler to the program, fresh off his retirement announcement. Blake, it's great to have you back on the air in the Peg on Winnipeg Sports Talk. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
First things first, I guess, congratulations on the retirement. The announcement came out a little while ago after not playing. Tell us about the decision and finally saying, yeah, that is my NHL career is in the rear view.
Yeah, I've known for a long time. I think after my last year in New York, I knew it was my time. My kids are getting older and wanting to spend more time with them, and just feeling like I had kind of given everything I had to the game, and it was just my time to step away. At the time, it didn't feel like a pressing or urgent need, to announce anything, and then just sort of organically, I guess it kind of came out doing an interview such as this, and but I'm happy to have it out there and be moving on. I'm thrilled about the next phase of life.
What was last year like for you? I mean, was there still a thought of potentially playing if an opportunity came out, or was it just a matter of starting the process of moving on from pretty much everything that you'd known as a professional for all those years?
No, like I said, once I got hurt, I kind of had it like mentally in my head that, maybe there was someone was telling me that it was time to move on. I'd been so lucky in my career, to not deal with many injuries. And then when that happened, I just kind of knew that it was maybe going to be my last year anyway. And then, I was lucky enough to come back, and we made it super deep and ultimately lost to Florida. There was maybe 24 hours after Florida won the Cup the first time, after my last year, that I was like, maybe go back into it. And that came and went pretty fast. So, no, the last year has been great. A lot of time with my family, a lot of time, coaching all three of my kids' hockey teams, all the things that I've wanted to do, I've been able to do the last year. So it was a really great year.
The last year with the Rangers, of course, was marred by that really ugly leg injury. And I mean, you had been basically an Ironman for the Winnipeg Jets throughout your career. What was that like? I mean, the last year with a new team and then having to go through something that you really hadn't done before.
I think what was a bummer about it was it was probably, the last 2 or 3 weeks there with the Rangers, I was starting to feel like myself again. I think just with all the new changes, being on a new team, feeling a little bit out of sorts, it's tough to be with a team for as long as I was in Winnipeg. And you just have so much, things that you're comfortable with. Just, you don't really have to think about those things. Then you go to a new organization, new situation, new roles. And I kind of felt like a fish out of water for a long time. So I was starting to feel like myself again. My game was starting to feel good. And then, the injury happens, which was, that was a bummer because, like I said, we had a really good team, won the President's Trophy. I thought we were going to have a really good chance to maybe, go on a deep run. And, it was just bad timing.
Blake Wheeler's with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk, fresh off the official retirement announcement. When you look back at your NHL career, the majority of it is going to be right here in Winnipeg. How now you're removed from the end, and we're thinking back to the career overall. How will you look back on your time here with Winnipeg, with the Jets, and also as a very important member of this community?
Yeah, I'm incredibly proud. I mean, Sam and I feel so lucky that we were able to be in one place for as long as we were, and we're so proud that it was in Winnipeg. We had no idea what to expect when we came up for the first time. Neither of us had ever been to Winnipeg, and just to be a part of that community, the amount of passion they have for their team, the amount of incredible friendships we've made over the years in Winnipeg, to be part of the group that kind of helped lay the foundation of what the Winnipeg Jets are today. All those things, we are so proud of everything that we were able to be a part of in that community, and still get to come back and see all of our best friends in the world that are Winnipeggers. We watch that team with a ton of pride now. All the great friends I have that are still a part of the Jets, whether it's the organization or players on the team. Yeah, I mean, ultimately the one thing is we wish we could have brought a cup to Winnipeg. I mean, that was like what got me out of bed every single day for 12 years. And, it's too bad we weren't able to do that. But, like I said, being a part of the group that laid the foundation to hopefully a Stanley Cup comes back to Winnipeg in the very near future.
It's so crazy to think about this. There's a 15-year patch on the Jet jersey this year, and that's how long it's been since the team came back in 2011. But let's rewind. I mean, you're still a young player, just established, about 3 years in as a full-time NHLer, and then the Atlanta Thrashers moved to Winnipeg. I mean, what do you remember about that summer before you and your teammates came here to start this new chapter with the Jets?
Yeah, personally, it was quite a whirlwind. I had just been traded from Boston to Atlanta, so I was kind of going through my first, a big move in my career. So that was, sort of just like an uprooting in and of itself. And then, we go from Atlanta to Winnipeg, and same kind of thing. It's, the whole team's moving together. But, Sam and I were it was a whirlwind, just getting our, setting, bearings in two new places kind of within a few months of each other. But like I said, from the moment we stepped foot in Winnipeg, the excitement the community had for having a team back, I think it just gave not only myself but our entire team such a boost of excitement that I think maybe towards the end of the time in Atlanta was lacking a little bit. Just there wasn't much buzz around the team. The team hadn't, really had much success over the years. So, when we came to Winnipeg, we felt like kings of a town that just, was so thrilled to have a team back.
It was, I mean, there was a honeymoon, but, the team did progress quite a bit over those first few years from a team that, wasn't a playoff team to making it in for the first time in that series against the Anaheim Ducks. I always love talking to guys that have played here in the market about their first experience with playoff hockey here in Winnipeg. I know the series was incredibly tight. It wasn't long, but what do you remember about skating out in front of the Whiteout for the first time as a member of the Jets? And we really felt like the NHL was back here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, I'm literally getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. I just remember when I skated out, our building just looked so different. I mean, I had played a lot of games in that building up until that first game, and then skating out there, everything looked different. All the people in white, I mean, it was full for warm-ups, and I felt like my feet didn't touch the ground, the entire game probably. It just was one of those experiences where you felt almost out of body. It's too bad we ended up losing that game in overtime. And to your point, I think statistically, I think we kind of won the series. It was we led for most of that series. We just we hadn't quite learned how to win the big games yet. But it was a great taste, and I think for our group, it was like real motivation for us to try to take another step. As an organization, hadn't won a playoff game yet, and to get into the playoffs and get swept, it lit a fire under our group for sure.
Hey, as one of the leaders, I mean, right around that time previous to it, of course, there was a coaching change and Paul Maurice came in. What do you remember about Paul coming in, and how did that change the trajectory of you and the group?
Paul walked in our locker room the first time and took his glasses off. The gentleman, my name is Paul Maurice, and I'll be your head coach. And I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. He just has such a presence about him. I mean, you guys have seen Paul enough, whether it be, in front of you in the media in Winnipeg and even now in Florida, just the way he commands a room. There's no mistakes with Paul Maurice. Everything is very calculated. He's incredibly bright. From a player standpoint, every day had a purpose. He was well thought out. There was no wasted days. If you got a day off, there was a reason behind it. So we just felt incredibly prepared. I think that was a big shift for our team was just how prepared we were every single day. And Paul just has a way of getting the most out of his players. The motivation for every game. I mean, game 57, in January, February can feel very monotonous in the course of a season, but he finds a way to make it incredibly meaningful and light that fire under the team every single day.
I'm interested to know about becoming captain. How did it happen? And as a player that was already a very important player and a leader on the team, how does that change your relationship with the head coach when you get the C put on your chest, especially in a market like Winnipeg where the hockey's so important?
Yeah, I think my leadership had progressed, over the years, and I was very fortunate to learn a lot from Andrew Ladd. I mean, Ladder, he and I lead in different ways, and I learned a lot from him. I was lucky to be one of the alternates while he was the captain. And I just soaked in how he led. And I was maybe a little bit more vocal than Ladder, definitely much more emotional at times. But I just felt very fortunate to have learned from him, and I learned from Zdeno Chara when I was in Boston, amongst others in that dressing room in Boston. And, even in Winnipeg, we had guys that I was able to learn from, in those first few years. So, I think the timing was right. And when Ladder moved on, I'd progressed and was ready for that responsibility. And, between Chevy, Chip, and Paul, they felt comfortable with me, and I obviously was incredibly honored to wear the C in Winnipeg. So my relationship with Paul has always been incredibly close. We spoke all the time. He wanted to get a pulse on the room, just kind of what the guys need. And I think I was kind of the middleman between, the players, the coach, just trying to communicate where the guys were at, where the energy was. And I think that was incredibly important to our success over the years, was our relationship, because when times are bad, we were able to hash it out and regroup and get the most out of the group every single day.
I mean, I know that it was pretty clear that you wore the C every day with a lot of pride, but what was the job of being captain like? How did it change, and was it challenging at times?
Yeah, I would say there's a honeymoon phase where everyone loves you and you can't do any wrong. And I think my play, was strong, so I was able to back it up. So it was, for a long time, it was a lot of fun. It was great. I mean, especially those years where we were super good and contending. It was a blast. And even the years where it started getting more challenging in the end, like I still, I wore it with a ton of pride. I would say that probably after that series we lost to St. Louis, things started changing. The personnel in our room changed, in a big way, and I just don't think the expectation changed with that. So that's where it started to get challenging, where, the expectation was to contend, and maybe, from a personnel standpoint, we weren't in a place to contend anymore. So at that stage of my career, re-signing in Winnipeg, the reason was, to my, my point at the beginning of this conversation, was, the vision of bringing a Stanley Cup to Winnipeg. And, the gap there, I think, was bigger than maybe we all thought. And that's where it started getting challenging, when, we weren't maybe aligned on what the expectation was anymore. And, that was tough. That was tough towards the end of my career to realize that maybe, our window closed a little bit quicker than we had hoped it would.
Well, it was certainly wide open in 17-18, and the team made it all the way to the conference finals. I mean, I know I've heard you speak before saying there really was a belief, certainly I think in the city, but also in the room, that you guys were the best team in the National Hockey League. I mean, what do you remember? Because there were so many highs of that playoff run, but obviously it ended prematurely as to what the goal was.
I mean, that was a year. I think it was a coming out party for our organization in a lot of different ways. And I think what I remember from it was there was always kind of this like cautious optimism all year of, are we as good as we maybe think we were? I think from the media standpoint too, it was like, are you guys that good? I remember going into that playoff series against Minnesota, and, with a young core, young group, like, can you guys go all the way? We had never won a playoff game as an organization going into that Minnesota series. So I remember winning that first game and just the huge relief from our group that we didn't have to answer that question anymore. So along the way, it was just checking a lot of boxes of, like, we were kind of proving it to ourselves and to everyone every single day with our goaltending, with our D-core, and then supplemented with our forward group. Like, I think with every single player in that room, with like every bone in our body, we believed that we were going to win it that year. So it was pretty demoralizing the way it ended against Vegas, because, get off to a great start in that first game at home. And even throughout the rest of the series, maybe minus, game 5, even game 2 and game 5 were close games, but the games in Vegas were the ones that got away, because, we felt like we controlled a lot of those games, and just, Marc-Andre Fleury, did what he does.
Blake, I mean, the team returned next season with, still, I mean, a stacked roster, very high expectations in the 2019 season. And in and around New Year's, I mean, you were right there at the top of the standings. And then the second half went poorly, and the team was bounced in the first round in a very tight series against St. Louis. Where did things sort of fall off the rails? And when you look back at that season, I mean, where did things go wrong? Because it really seemed like the window was very much open again that season with a little more experience, but it just didn't work.
Buff got hurt pretty bad that year, and I think that gets lost in the shuffle a bit. How important he was to our team and to our success. And when he got hurt, Troop stepped in and did a phenomenal job, both on the power play, kind of taking over that number one role. But still, like, Buff's Buff. And when he was on the ice, he just commanded such a different level of respect and presence from our team. So I think that gets lost in the shuffle a bit. Like, when we lost him, we definitely slid a little bit. We weren't quite the same team. And then when he came back, I don't think he was 100%. So that hurt us. That is a clear thing that you can point to in that season of, I think, when things started to shift a little bit. And I think through that slide, I think our morale was maybe damaged a little bit too. We regrouped pretty honorably in that St. Louis series, being down 0-2, tying it up. And I mean, we were up. It was either 2-0 or 3-0 at home in Game 5. And if we win that game, you just never know what could happen, right? So there's all these little moments throughout playoff series or even through seasons where, coulda, woulda, shoulda. You don't know how it's going to end up. But that, to me, when you talk about that 2019 second half, that was a pretty clear blow to our team when we lost Buff.
I mean, listen, I could probably ask you a million things about Buff and talk for 2 hours, but I mean, a player, a teammate, when people ask you, just off air, hey, what was it like playing with Dustin Byfuglien? I mean, where do you even start?
The headline I would put on that is like, in Buff's prime, I would have traded him for anyone in the entire league. And I say that with complete confidence because there was nobody like him. You don't really realize what you have in a player until they're gone. And as a right winger, when I'm on the ice with Buff, yeah, he gave me headaches sometimes. I played a lot of right defense when he was up, leading the rush. And he was a bit of a wild card. And I gave him a hard time when we played together. I called him a midfielder. He didn't really play forward or defense. He was kind of somewhere in the middle all the time. But yeah, just how his hockey sense, his vision, how easily he broke the puck out, the little plays that he makes that people don't really see. I mean, people see the big hits and the physicality and some of those highlight moments from Buff, but his hockey sense was a 10 out of 10. And he just made everyone's life, for the most part, so much easier. So we missed him a ton when he retired.
I mean, and obviously that's one of those moments that no one really saw coming. I mean, you're the captain of this team. You've still got a real good squad. Expectations and hopes are high. And he's done the first day of training camp. I mean, what do you remember about that, and how much of a shock to the system was that, not just for the captain, but for everybody in the room?
Yeah, it was demoralizing because, like I said, you just can't replace Buff. And I think his injury was worse than he let on. And I don't think he came back 100%. And I don't want to speak for Buff, but it certainly hurt. When you lose a player of that caliber and you're not really able to replace him, I mean, that leaves a big void in your decor, and keep in mind from 2019 until that next season, with Buff retiring, we lost Troops, we lost Tyler Myers, we lost Toby Enstrom, we lost Ben Sherratt. That's 5 of contending decor. That makes it really tough. So that's kind of what I talk about when you turn the page on a group that was contending for a Stanley Cup for a couple of years. It made it really tough.
Blake, one of the things that always comes up when we talk about you and your career here in Winnipeg is just the Ironman nature, the fact that you were in every night. I don't know how many times on this show when we've been talking about you, I've gone back to that game late in the season in Dallas. I want to say it's 2014. Happened to be there where you got ran into the side of the boards when the door was open. I mean, it looked like an incredibly serious injury. The team's playoff hopes were technically alive, and we're worried about the offseason, if you're going to be able to play next year, and then you roll out about 3 minutes later with the season on the line and finish that up. I actually personally thought, and I remember saying on the air the next day, I think we just saw without a doubt who the next captain of the Winnipeg Jets was. Do you remember that incident? How was it like to get back on there? Why did you do it? And just maybe a little thought about playing through as much as you did to be able to put up 82 games over and over again.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to that, and I think it's just if you're able to play, you play. You know, this league is so competitive, and how I started in Boston, and then I was given this opportunity in Atlanta and Winnipeg, and you just don't want to ever miss time, because you miss time, players are too good, and you lose your spot or whatever it might be. So I guess I just got into this mindset that if you're able to play, you play, and it became really, really black and white. Like, when I got injured my last year in New York, like I couldn't play, right? You stand up and your leg's gone. That means you can't play. Anything short of scenarios like that, it's you try to find a way. And that incident in particular, we went to the back room and got an X-ray, and it looked good. And so I just let's go. Like, what are we waiting for? And I think that was just the mindset. I just wanted to be out there. I had a incredibly horrible case of FOMO. I didn't want to miss out on anything with the guys, and above all else, I just loved the game, and I loved being out there with my teammates. So anything short of like a no-brainer, you can't play, I was going to try to give it my best.
Well, the other one that I got to ask you about is a rather infamous injury against the Nashville Predators. We'll call it a mid-body injury. How the hell did you finish that game?
That was the most pain I've ever been in. I went back into the dressing room, and I was on all fours for probably 10 to 15 minutes, kind of in between like throwing up and passing out. And I just didn't, you're just kind of waiting for it to go away. And finally it did. Like it kind of started feeling better, and it was in between the second and third. Without getting too graphic, I had to pass a couple of tests to make sure there wasn't anything, any blood in areas there shouldn't be. And after that, it was like, okay, everything looks good. I mean, I would say the advice I was given was maybe don't go back out there. But to my point, FOMO kicks in, and I'm like, I'm feeling okay. Like let's go for it. And so I was ready to go to Vancouver with the team the next day. And luckily enough, Rob Millette was like, let's get an ultrasound done just to make sure there's nothing wrong. And sure enough, there was. So yeah, I mean, Jamo shoots that puck hard, I got to tell you. And I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but you play long enough, and things are gonna catch you in places you don't want it to. And like I said, luckily enough, the Jets medical staff is first class, and they take great care of you, and they were looking out for me there.
Longtime Jet captain Blake Wheeler with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Blake, the one year that you didn't have the C at the end was that final season. Obviously very different than your other years in Winnipeg. How challenging was that for you personally? And was the end somewhat amicable between you and the team? Was it the right time when you look back?
Yeah, without disclosing too much, I just have too much respect for Chevy and Chip to get into everything that had happened. But yeah, it was really hard, obviously, to lose the captaincy and the way I did. I would say that there's layers to that situation where I take ownership over what had happened. I think if I'm being completely transparent, I felt like it was probably time for me to move on, the year before that. I'd been there a long time. I felt like I had been a driver for that group and that organization for a long time. And I just felt it slipping. I felt, I wasn't loving how I was showing up anymore. I was, my leadership just wasn't where I wanted it to be anymore. So I felt like it was probably a year before that was time. And, the following year, actually, I'm incredibly grateful for that year that I was there. I felt like I was able to, I learned a lot, I grew a lot, and was able to have like an incredible year with the organization, with my teammates. a year that I'm incredibly proud of. Of all the years in Winnipeg, it's one of the years I'm most proud of, just for how I was able to show up again and be the leader I wanted to be again, even without the captaincy. So I don't blame anyone for that situation. I take ownership for all of it and how it went down. I think if there was anything I could go back and upgrade it, maybe be some communication over the kind of the end of my time in Winnipeg and just getting on the same page. But how things ultimately ended between me and the Jets, completely amicable, handled first class, I felt, by both sides, and to the point where I have a great relationship with everyone involved with the Winnipeg Jets, and like I said, that's why I'm so happy that I did have that last year, because when I ended up leaving, it was on great terms.
Blake Wheeler's with us, longtime captain, franchise leader in games played, assists, points, although your pal Mark Scheifele's coming up on that one pretty soon. Blake, now that you've officially retired, what's next for Blake Wheeler?
There's a lot of coaching youth hockey involved. I would just put a blanket over coaching. Towards the end of my time in Winnipeg as well, maybe the last 3 years there, I worked with a coach myself, meant to help, in these areas that I talked about, my leadership, how I wanted to show up every day. Andrew Ladd actually is the one who introduced me to my coach named Dan Leflar. And, he works at a firm called Novus Global. And, through that time, my eyes started to be opened of how I was relating to be a pro athlete, kind of I don't want to call it struggles, but just sort of the grind of being a pro athlete, how you hear pro athletes talk about the day in, day out of it. And I just thought there might be a real opportunity for other athletes. And that's what I've started doing myself. So Andrew Ladd is, he's the lead of Novus Global Sport, and I'm one of his teammates now again. And, that's kind of our mission is helping pro athletes and, both their careers and helping them with their performance, but also with their leadership, with their, being parents, being dads, being husbands, all the above. Just, it was transformational for my life and my career. And that was sort of like my vision, was how can I help give this away to athletes as well.
I know that you've mentioned before that, you are looking at staying in hockey. There's a bright future. This has basically been your life. What's more likely in the future for Blake Wheeler? Coaching within the National Hockey League, being involved in management, or potentially working elsewhere in the business, like for something like the PA?
I would say the first two would be what I have my sights set on one day down the line. I love being on the bench with the guys. I love coaching. I love being in the mix. Management's incredibly intriguing as well. So I don't have a great answer for that yet. I'm open to learning more about what both of those entail. And you're kind of starting from scratch. You're I guess a rookie, so to speak, and there's a lot of learnings to do of what that entails and what it takes to be great at both of those types of things. So I'm very interested in learning the different side of the game, and I just love it. I love I love the league. I love the game, and any way I can be a part of it going forward is an opportunity I'm really looking forward to.
Blake, it's been so much fun having you on the program. Thanks so much for doing this. Congratulations on the incredible career. We were talking just before we started. I was asking about your kids, and I immediately recoiled to realize how old they were. In a lot of ways, they grew up here. As the newest member of the Winnipeg Jets alumni, when are we going to see you and the Wheeler clan back here in the Peg sometime for a game?
Yeah, we're definitely coming back here in a few weeks. Like I said, we get back to see our friends. Going to take place in the Vogue Golf Tournament. Chris Watchorn has become a good pal, and he's done an amazing job with that line, and just he does such a great job in the community. So any way I can help Chris out, I'm always willing to. And yeah, there's nothing I love more than going to that building. So I'm sure you'll see me there, hopefully in the near future.
Well, hey, listen, on behalf of everyone here at Winnipeg Sports Talk and to the fans in the chat, congratulations on an incredible career, especially for the amazing years here in Winnipeg. All the best to Team Wheeler moving forward, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here in the Peg at some point soon. Thanks so much for the time, Blake.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.